Welcome to the podcast series, Ignite Your Life with the Walk of Christ. In this series, Brother Mercurio and I will be examining the teachings and the walk of Christ in depth. So join us on this exciting podcast series and learn the deeper meaning of what Christ came here to teach us. Today, I have a very special guest. This is somebody who's extremely dear to my heart. And this is a person that I met years ago when I first joined a mystery school. And he was one of the first people to really make me feel comfortable. This person has so much knowledge. So sit down and listen. I mean, whatever you're doing, you need to pay close attention because he is going to blow your mind. He has studied the Western mystery traditions, Kabbalah, ancient Greek mysteries, Jewish mysteries, Hermeticism, Christian mysteries, Gnostic mysteries. And what's really interesting about him is he's an ordained priest or bishop in the Catholic. I think it's like the old Catholic tradition. We're going to be asking him some information about that. And I just want to introduce to you now, Mercurio. It is super nice, brother, to actually have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for joining me in this podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's all my pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
We are going to have the best conversation. I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about the walk of Christ. And this is such an interesting conversation because I love the Bible so much. And I have been doing a deeper dive into it with, learning a little bit more from the original language and deeper studies into some of the symbolic things that are being said. So having this conversation with you is literally like crack for me, So I'm super excited to do this. I want to hear a little bit more about this bishop in the old Catholic tradition. What is that? What is an old Catholic tradition?
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I would say around the 1700s, 1800s, there was a group that broke away from the traditional Catholic Church because they didn't agree with Vatican II, which was a decision to say that the Pope was infallible. And so these guys broke away and they formed their own branch, and it was still recognized by Rome because they were all ordained bishops and so on. Mm-hmm. So they started up their own thing, and then this split into various different versions of Old Catholicism. So I belong to one of these called the Holy See of Antioch, and specifically there's an order called the Order of the Rose of Sharon, which I run.
You run it? You actually run it?
It's essentially underneath. It's under the umbrella of the Holy See of Antioch.
Is that kind of part of like the Rosicrucianary, or is it something different?
I would say it's it's connected with Rosicrucianism because you have to be a Rosicrucian to be a member. You have to have studied esoteric Christianity to be in the Order of the Rose of Sharon. So, because we like to go really deep and find a deeper meaning in things. Because I think one of the things that struck me for a long time is that the regular Christian church has lost its connection to the mystical side. Like many religions, they appear dead to many people. I think because they've lost that really the sort of mystical energy that's behind it. That gets people excited and makes them feel like they're experiencing things. Many people I know go to certainly in England, the Anglican Church. I'm from England originally, and go in there and they say, well, it's dry and empty. The priests don't say anything much. They give you an intellectual analysis of a Bible passage, but they don't give you any energy or make you feel like you're part of it or understand what that Bible story was really trying to get across. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do get some that are really good, of course. But so, yeah, we try to look into that side, and it's a fairly closed kind of, it's like a monastic order, but living in the world, So nobody wears, we obviously don't wear the garb of a monk in the world, but, we study to try and study to that level.
Do you have to be celibate like a priest does?
Not in the same way. I mean, you take vows, of course, which include a vow of celibacy, but we interpret that as being loyal to one person or being focused on one particular path. So it's that kind of, it's like you're not straying outside and, sleeping with lots of people or anything like that. It's sort of
so it's sort of like the Buddhists believe, kind of. Is that what you're kind of, because they don't have a problem with you getting married. What they have a problem with you doing is being promiscuous, or is that kind of like what you're talking about?
I would say it's like that, yeah, because there's other sort of esoteric reasons for sticking with one person energetically, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go into that another time, but yeah, it's along those lines.
Yeah, we can have some really good conversations about a lot of different things. That's so interesting to me. I mean, I actually did not know that you were actually part of that. So that makes you even more interesting.
Well, that's another whole podcast, so I can tell you about it. But in short, when we're ordained, we're connected through the laying of hands by bishops, going all the way back to Jesus. So it's like,
whoa,
or to St. Peter, I guess, actually. So in our tradition, we have at least 91 lineages that go back through different bishops back to the Vatican. So now what that means, I mean, people worry about lineages a lot, but does it mean anything? Well, it does in a way, because you've got a sort of transmission there. You still have to do the work, and you still have to study and meditate and learn. This is a very important factor, actually, is learning through experience what the Bible stories mean. And we use sort of techniques like Lectio Divina, which is a way of visualizing yourself in the Bible scene and trying to understand exactly what's going on. So there are things like that.
Can you explain that to me? You're visualizing, like, how do you go about this? Do you just pick a passage, or you pick a story part? Because there's a lot that went on through his life.
It's a sort of traditional Christian technique of meditation, really. What they might do is pick a Bible story. So say, for example, in Luke, you've got the scene of the woman at the well. Mm-hmm. Who's a Samaritan, and Jesus is at the well, and she comes up to draw water, and he says, "Can you give me a drink?" And she says, "But you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. I can't do that. It's not. I don't have a woman. Why would you even ask me that?" Sort of thing. He says, "Well, go and ask your husband," right? And then she says, "Oh, I don't have a husband," or something. And he says, "That's right. You've had 7 husbands.
Oh,
and these
right.
are their names." And then he goes into all the detail, and she's like, she just jaw drops. And
right. I remember that scene in the movie or the series, The Chosen.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's in there. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's beautiful. So what this Lectio Divina would do is get you to imagine yourself in that scene, watching them. And then you might even talk to one of the characters. You'll say to Jesus, what's behind what you're saying? And then you'll think about it, and you'll probably get an impression of what that's about. And then you might ask the woman at the well, what was going through your mind, and and it makes you reflect on it and really kind of get deep into whatever's going on. And then at the end, it's usually some amazing revelations. Like, I remember first doing that with that scene and learning that the importance of water in the whole the Christian story. You'll find water mentioned all the way through it. Like Jesus always says, I'm the living waters. And I think he said to her, the waters I have, if I give them to you, you'll never thirst. So what does that mean? You can go into that real deep. And he walks on water. And there's so many references to water into wine as one of the 7 miracles. So it's in John. It just got me thinking on those lines, for example, so it's quite a useful technique.
So I want to ask you, I mean, since we're talking about this, what is the reference to water? I mean, what does that mean? What is all that about in the Bible, since he's using that so often? I mean, is it have to do with water alchemy, transmuting emotions? Or is this something completely different?
Wow. Well, it's hard to intellectualize it, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that it's better to try and experience, which is the point of these meditations. But in general, I think it refers to your inner spirit. If you become through, your either devotional path through Christianity or through your esoteric path or whatever path you're following, to start to connect more and more with the divine in you, your inner spark of the divine, or what the esotericists call your higher genius. That's what it's about, because that never runs out. That is a living, it's a living presence in your life that refreshes you spiritually constantly, which, again, going back to what I said about churches having lost their connection with mysticism, they've lost that living water. It's the same for us individually. It's like, if you can live your life just worrying about what you're doing tomorrow, what the shopping is, what your neighbor's saying, or you can go deep within and this touch on the living waters, which is basically your inner divine part that will constantly inspire you every day and constantly guide you into new situations or people that will transform you. And it becomes like alchemy, a bit like you mentioned. It's a more deeper spiritual alchemy. It's sort of like once you connect with that divine source, or the spring of water, to use that analogy, You become transformed as an individual. And I think that's what Christ was alluding to. That's what he's saying in many of his stories, that, you can, if you touch on those living waters, and then that leaves you with the question, well, how do I do that?
That's why they're called the mysteries, the Western mysteries, the Jewish mysteries, the Kabbalic mysteries. I'm curious, like Adam and Eve before the fall, that whole thing, and they get into the rivers of Nahar, flows through Gibeah, the river of fire, into Gihon. And okay, so basically these rivers are flowing through. So they're talking about the tree of life, right?
Yeah.
And, flowing through, and that connection. When I personally did this study on this particular thing, I'll never forget that I had a meeting with my proctor, and there's this little bitty paragraph that describes this in this picture. And I said, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea. I can't figure this out. Can you please describe it? And she said, no. And I was like, she's like, you need to go meditate on it. You need to go scry this picture. You need to go look within. And so I started doing this deep dive into it. And some of the messages I got was that there was two trees, and there was sort of like the before Adam and Eve, that had like bodies. And then there was the after, where they made this transition into physical form and decided to eat from the tree of good and evil, or knowledge. Because there's a tree of life, and then there's a tree of good and evil, and yeah. And so they chose to do that because they wanted to learn through experience. And I got this download about it, and I was so excited, and I went to her and I was like, I got it. And it was kind of like using kind of the same thing that you're talking about, that kind of experience of just kind of diving into it and getting that message. And I personally have found that the more that I do this, that message gets expanded. It's almost like I can only take so much, because my brain can only handle a little bit at a time, and then it just expands more. The knowledge just keeps on growing. It's really quite interesting. But yeah, I know we are kind of digressing a little bit, but it's still interesting. And because we are talking about the walk of Christ, and he does speak about waters. So I was just kind of curious if that's what he's talking about. Is he talking about that flow moves from the highest part of God into the physical form?
It sounds like he probably is. It's something like that. Yeah. I mean, he may not use those terms of the four rivers or anything like that, but I think certainly what you just said there about this knowledge continually expanding and growing, that's what living waters do. I mean, it's a non-stop fountain. And your brain can't always apprehend it. It's just constant. And isn't that beautiful? I mean, it just indicates to us that we can be in contact with the divine all the time. I think that's what he's saying. It's like, the other things in the Bible about you cannot, your master cannot be, mammon and spiritual. It's like you either follow the material or you follow the spiritual. And that's what it is. If you start tapping into that living water, you just start automatically, following a spiritual path. You can't help it almost.
I actually think that's a really good subject to start on. Is he talked about having different type of masters. You can't have this money as your master, for example. I think that this is a very huge misconception. Because there's also this part where it says money is the root of all evil, and so I think that I'm going to kind of say what my thoughts are. And then I want you to, jump in and then say, you're sort of right or you're sort of wrong, because you're way more advanced than I am.
I wouldn't assume that.
I'm extremely gifted and mystical, but knowledge-wise, I would say I'm probably about a quarter of where you are. And so, just from hearing you talk, and eventually I'm going to get there. I even told Pluto the other day, I said, I want to be like you when I grow up. Yeah, because she's so knowledgeable, it's like she just talks and it's like, oh my God, how do you know all this stuff? It's just crazy. My thoughts about this is that sometimes we put so much energy and emphasis into something that it becomes our master. We're so concerned about making money, acquiring riches, getting more and more and more and more and more, and it becomes our God. And I had a situation where I had a fairly famous person. She was internet famous, and she was referring me a lot of clients. And when it came down to a moral, standing, she was more concerned about the almighty dollar than she was about this person's emotional welfare. And so that's a perfect example of this versus this. Like, what do you care about? Do you care about people? And, do you care about your soul? What kind, where's your heart at? And so when I think of this and I hear money is the root of all evil, it's literally when you become very rich, it's really like a test for you. It's like a test of your soul. What's going to happen? Are you going to become arrogant and hateful and mean and judgmental and thinking, all these things, and concerned more about that than you are about people and love and caring and kindness? And so that's why I personally feel like it's the root of all evil. But I also think that when he's talking about you can't have two gods, you can't worship money and God. He's talking about the same thing. It's sort of like when you act this way, you're treating this money like it's your God. I have found that people will put their energy into all different ways of making money, but they don't put their energy into their own personal growth.
Yeah.
Spiritually, emotionally, mentally. They won't spend their money on bettering themselves. They will only spend it on ways to make money.
Right.
It's very interesting how, and that to me right there is an example. So that's just my thoughts. What do you think?
I have several perspectives on this, as you can imagine.
I can imagine.
I mean, so there's three things I'll talk about, I guess. So the first thing is that if you look at Jesus and his story and his path, he began in poverty and he maintained his life in poverty. He didn't want to have those attachments. In the Buddhist world, they talk about attachments, don't they, to the material world. So one perspective is that it's talking about that. It's like, I don't think money itself is an evil thing, but it's just part of the world and the whole world around us. It's not the spiritual side. Like, these are separate things. It's almost like oil and water, that you've got this, and then water is the spiritual part. Oil is like, the world. I think that you can't mix them. So like, yes, you could spend all your life and all your energy making money, and that's part of the mundane world, and we all have to live in a physical body, and we have to somehow sustain that, and we're conditioned at the moment that you need a job and that you need some way of bringing that in, or a business or something. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. I think when it goes wrong is when people, exactly as you said, people make it an idol, and it becomes an obsession. The money's more important than anything else. Because, I mean, you can even hear some quite wealthy people, like I think even Richard Branson, for example, or even Elon Musk, has said that, I'm just good at it. I just like making money. I'm not particularly bothered about it too much. Whereas you'll get other people saying, I must make money, I must be a millionaire. And, there's a difference there. So a great story in the Bible is in Daniel 3, which is about Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar at one point tells everybody in his country or his kingdom to worship a gold idol that has been made by his people, his advisors. And he says, right, if you don't do this, I'm going to throw you in an oven and burn you. So when you hear the music, you have to bow down to this idol. Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3, sort of thing. Yeah. They play the music and they all bow down, except for 3 who are actually Jewish advisors who don't believe in idols, who don't do that. And, then the officials go up to Nebuchadnezzar and say, hey, did you notice these 3 guys didn't bow down, And these are like, he's, through a different story earlier on in Daniel, he's made them important people in his kingdom because of another miracle. He respects them in some ways. So he gets really angry with them and says, why did you not die down? You're not supporting me, kind of thing. Why did you not bow down before the idol? And right men throw them in the furnace. And so they say to him, we can't, we on honor of our God, we believe in God, we believe in the divine light. We cannot bow down to another idol. And even if you throw us in the fire, we believe our God will protect us and save us because he's all powerful. And even if he doesn't, we're still going to go in the fire because we believe that strongly, that we cannot worship another God. And credit to them. I don't know in that situation if I'd have that courage. I don't know, but so they do. They get thrown in the fire, and it's so hot. Like he tells the people who make the fire, make it 7 times hotter than everyone else. And it's so hot that when the soldiers throw them in, the soldiers are immediately burned and die. And the people go in. The 3 advisors are in the fire, but they don't get burned. And the king is watching, and he sees actually 4 people in there. And the 4th one is like a divine being, that's clearly protecting them. And they're not getting burned. And he looks at them, and he's amazed, and he tells them to come out. Okay, come out. And they come out, and they've not been touched. There's no smell of smoke. There's no burn on their clothes. And then he says, wow, your God is all powerful. I accept that. And, now you can be even more important in my kingdom. And then he tells everybody, announcement, if anyone criticizes these guys and their God, then they shall be burned as well. Something like that. So it's like, wow. So there's a sort of complete shift mentally. Yeah. So what's more powerful, if you bow down to a sort of statue made of gold, does it really do anything for you, or if you're in touch with your divine nature and you have that connection with God or whatever you call that, you will see miracles, potentially. So coming back to our original assertion, maybe that's the reason, or it begins to point the way to the reason why it's a waste of time, in a sense, to worship something that's made of gold or made of man-made objects, I mean, now we don't have statues so much, but we have things like people idolize film stars, or they idolize, their gods become the internet, or they become, all kinds of different.
Exactly. Yeah. Now you'll notice I have Ganesh and I have Buddha behind me. I have statues, but granted, I don't worship them. Like I don't sit down and worship the statue, but I also want to kind of this would be probably a whole other podcast, but that maybe we should consider doing. But I mean, a lot of people use these symbols as a mean to make a connection. Do you see that as the same thing? I mean, even in the Christianity religion, you've got the statue of Christ on a cross. And so what is the difference between worshiping an idol versus, I mean, you're basically worshiping a statue too. It's not any different. So what do you think about that? Because I mean, I know that we have, you can go and buy a statue of different angels or saints or even different like Greek gods and stuff like that. And how do you differentiate that? I guess that would be my question.
Yeah, and you can. I think it's all to do with what's in you. It's not about the statue, actually. It's like, do you develop an attachment to it and start seeing, the statue as your answer to all your prayers? Or do you see it as a way to point to the divine, to inspire you, to lift you up? That's what the Catholics respond. If anyone asks them why they have statues of Mary or other things in the churches, they say, well, you're not supposed to worship the statue. You're supposed to see that as a way to ascend to the divine. There's a divine that shows you another way to find God. I
was actually in a Catholic church this morning. I had to go to a memorial service, and I haven't been in a Catholic church in a really long time. And so there was some really interesting things that I saw there that, first off, I love the rituals, and I love how they do the symbolic cross, head to chest to shoulder. I mean, because I know the deeper meaning behind it, but people just kind of go through the motions and they don't realize. Each time somebody came up to speak, or even the priest, they would bow to some sort of thing that was back there. I'm not really even sure what it was, but it was some kind of golden thing that was back there that they would bow to.
That's the host. That's the wafer, the body of Christ.
Oh, okay. I was just curious about that, because I was like, what are you bowing to? Why is this golden thing? You're just kind of doing this thing. But I don't really see it as, I don't see it as worship either. A lot of your Protestant religions, that's part of the reason they have a problem with Catholicism, is because of these kind of things. I see it as being reverent to the energy that it is carrying.
They believe that's literally the body of Christ in there, in the form of those wafers. So that's why they do it.
Oh, wow. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's the cupboard where they keep the wafers. So that, you know, when they hold the wafer up and they do all this, that's it's the place where they put those things as highly sacred objects. But they're not worshiping it. You're right. I mean, they're just bowing towards it and acknowledging God. You know, acknowledging that it's.
I think you're clearing a lot of stuff up for me, for sure. And now it's like, now I understand. Let's talk about the walk of Christ. You know, there was a lot of things that he did and said. And there is I have to bring this up because this is like the thorn in my side. I know you know, but it's like every single time somebody does this, it's like fingernails down the chalkboard that they feel like that they believe that they were born into sin. And so because of that, it gives them permission to be a sinner and sin every day. I had this conversation with this woman one day and she goes, well, I don't know about you, but I sin every day. And I'm like, well, Lord have mercy. I want to pray for you right now because I don't even remember the last time I sinned. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but there is a scripture that says that you need to be like the Father, perfect. It literally says that. I find it so interesting how somehow or other the stuff has gotten twisted and converted into, it's like, have you even read the Bible? Because it literally says, and then he comes back and says, sin no more, like, don't do this anymore. Your goal is to work on your personal perfection. And he understands that you're starting off imperfect sometimes, because the world is imperfect. So it's kind of hard, to take that walk when you're constantly being attacked and verbally, emotionally, mentally by all different kinds of people. I also realize that he's literally saying, I see that this is happening, but don't let it affect you. So like if somebody is, slaps you in the face on your right side, then turn the other side and let them slap the other side. Do they even know what that means? I mean, the deeper meaning behind that?
Yeah, most people don't.
I mean, I don't think that they're saying be a victim. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is that you can't be affected by the negativity. You've got to let them realize it's like this energy that resides within me is so divine that it doesn't affect me. So go ahead. That's kind of how I feel. I mean, I'm kind of on a pedestal right now. Sorry.
No problem. No, I think you're right. I mean, the first thing that, Christians often forget, I think, is the teaching in the Bible that Jesus actually has already saved us. So even if you fall down and you have to keep striving to realize that divine spark inside yourself, the inner Christ you're trying to manifest that in your life. But it's a shift in thinking. A lot of things Jesus taught were advanced thinking. I think they kind of lead you into a completely different way of thinking. Like as you've just mentioned, someone slaps you on the cheek, you offer them your other cheek. And there's a real deep meaning behind that, as you know. So, yeah, I think first, Jesus has already saved us. So if you sin, actually, it's not going to cause a lot of problems. And the Catholic Church, unfortunately, have made sin into such a huge thing, which is probably stemming from, Renaissance times when the Catholic Church was the main political influence and power in most of Europe, and other parts of the world. So it was a way to control people, I think. That's my theory is like, if you make everyone feel guilty and that you're sinning all the time, then of course you're going to constantly want the church to save you, and you'll give them money and you'll do things because you think that's the answer, but
right.
Forgetting the point. And of course, for a long time, the Bible was just in Latin, so most of us couldn't read it. You had to be a priest to read it, so of course, information control. So I think, it sounds like I'm getting a downer on the Catholic Church because I see there's lots of beauty in it as well. This aspect of things of keeping people in a state of thinking, oh, I'm a sinner all the time. It's actually... It's not actually what the Bible's saying. The Bible says Jesus went on the cross. When he died, he transformed all of our sin. It's gone. We don't need to see that as the important thing anymore. And that was the sort of big shift forward from the Old Testament, which was all about, like obeying the commandments and like being, obviously we still need to use those as a guide, but in the Jewish tradition, they have to try to perform 613 mitzvot or 613 good acts that will make sure that God forgives them and so on. And they still live in that way of thinking. Whereas Christ kind of turned that on its head and said, right now I've died for your sins. That's it. From the moment he was crucified and rose again, all our sins were forgiven.
So, but here's where the conflict comes in.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying, Protestants believe, but they take it to a whole other level. Like, all my sins are forgiven. Yeah. Because I was saved and I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart. And the problem is that they keep on sinning, and they use that as an excuse to behave badly, to be a bad person. Yeah. And that's the part that I just don't get. It's like, you're just saying, well, I'm a sinner. I'm not perfect. This is okay for me to bash gay people and post all these mean, posts and be hateful to my brother and mean and judgmental. And, I mean, if you think about it, what did Jesus do? I mean, do you remember when he went into the home of, and I can't remember if it was Matthew that hosted it, but there was like prostitutes and thieves and all that kind of stuff in the house. And they were having dinner and they were like, what are you doing? Who are all these people? What are you doing here? And he's like, yeah, I mean, the whole point behind that was that, and he was enjoying that service, and he even washed their feet. And the point behind that is that you're not supposed to be like hateful and angry and judgmental and say you have to do this, and this, and because you haven't been saved or whatever. You were, like you said, you were saved the second that he died on the cross. So the whole point behind that is all you have to do is believe and then start walking the walk. He says, follow me. And when he says, follow me or believe in me, he's saying, believe in my teachings and do as I say. I mean, at least that's how I feel about it. I'm kind of like, I think, I mean, personally, everything that I've read it's all about striving to be a better person.
It's all inside. There's this concept in psychology of an internal versus an external locus of control. Like, where do you get your control from? Is it from reacting to external events and people? Because if you're doing that, you'll be anxious and you'll have all kinds of problems. But if you start reacting to the God within you, your inner divine, you'll make much better choices automatically. And I think that's what Christ is saying, is to kind of stop being attached. It's like Buddhist. In fact, Buddhism has a very similar concept of non-attachment, doesn't it? And on the subject of idol worship, the Buddha is supposed to represent our Buddha nature. It's like, it's not an idol. It's like showing you this is your perfection inside that you can achieve. And I think Christ was doing a similar, I'm not saying the same thing, but similar thing in terms of the meals and he was talking to tax collectors and, prostitutes and people that you're not supposed to, and the Pharisees were all freaking out about. He also said, something along the lines of, a healer doesn't go to all the well people. Healer has to go and find the sick people. So that's what he's doing. And he loves everybody anyway, so it's love your neighbor as yourself, which is also another whole realm of advanced thinking. But I think what it's coming down to really is it's your relationship with God in you, as you say, and walking that path. And I think a lot of what Jesus showed was how to do it. A lot of his, the stories are about how he responded to things, how he reacted to situations, how he taught stories that were about how people react to things, which is why I guess that method of teaching is so powerful, because it shows a story is a much better way to get someone to think differently than just saying to them, oh yeah, stop sinning. If I go and tell somebody in the street, look, stop doing that, it's like they'll use the F word at me or something, It's like,
yeah, exactly. But don't you think that a lot of what he's saying he's teaching is almost like psychology? In some ways, it seems like he's just showing you how to live a good life, how to be happy, how to, live in divinity.
Yeah, I think you're right, and what he's saying is you're not going to get the happiness from the material world. It's just not going to happen. So this is why you have to choose between divine and mammon.
I really want to talk about that for a second, okay? Because I think this is important right here, that you're not going to get happiness from the material world. I think that in itself can be misconstrued or misinterpreted so easily.
You don't get permanent happiness from the material world. You might get transitory, temporary happiness. But what is that? That's really just your human body reacting and getting excited about a particular situation, and then it dies away. Things are constantly coming and going, and the energies are rising and falling. So, one day you might meet somebody who takes you for dinner, and then you have a great time and a great conversation. But then when that's finished, you're back to your normal material life again.
Meaning unhappy.
Probably a state of, for most people, possibly unhappiness, because many people are craving all kinds of things to try and keep their happiness going, and generate those endorphins and happy chemicals. So, people get addicted to things like sex or to food or to shopping or other things just because they want to find that answer. They want something that is going to make them happy, and they can't stand a state of anxiety or unhappiness, like most people. But Jesus says a different thing. He says that's not the way to do it. Conversely as well, which we can come back to, don't become like a hermit and be austere either. Because that's not going to help you either. Just to, if you're going to stop yourself enjoying anything, then that also is going to cause problems, because we're here to live in the world as well. And I think he really enjoyed living in the world. He just, did what he wanted to do. So it's about getting that inner connection with your inner divine, which then tinctures your whole body. That's the alchemy thing. It tinctures your whole soul and your way of thinking and your way of acting to others. And that just gives you happiness automatically. And that was the shift in thinking, I think, I suspect Jesus was trying to get across to people, but it's not about just getting a transaction going, it's about an inner connection, which will then make everything else be okay anyway. You might realize you don't even need these material things, because he never did. If you think about it, Jesus was always in poverty. And as he said, consider the lilies of the field. They're clothed and arrayed in beauty by God. The lilies automatically have beautiful petals and look nice. You don't need to go and paint the lilies. You don't need to go and force feed them so they grow into a different shape. They just are as they are. And so are we as humans. We can live our lives and be happy once we connect to our inner world without needing to seek ways externally to change how we look, or how we are.
I think that in itself could be explored so deeply, because when I work with people, they say, but how do you get there? What's the steps? How do you make that transformation? How do you do that? And so many people, they live their whole life going to church and trying so hard to find that kind of connection, but they still see God as separate. And I think that that's where the biggest problem lies. One of the things that Christ said was that when the disciples were asking him, where is the kingdom of heaven? He said, well, it's not up there, over here, over there. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And that's where, like, when you can learn how to draw down that energy and bring it into your whole spirit sensation and pull it into you and hold it and allow that energy to live inside of you. You're literally pulling something energetic into you and letting it survive inside of you. And this has to happen on a regular basis. I have personally found that if I'm not doing this every day, I start to feel like everybody else, and I can get moody, cranky, upset about things, like these people did this or these people did that. But as long as I'm pulling that energy down in me, it's like somebody can do something and I'm just like, that's really bothering me.
We're all human, right?
Right, exactly. It's like it's like you've got to keep on filling yourself up over and over and over again and pulling that energy into you and letting it live inside of you. But
could that be the living waters that we talked about earlier?
Could be. Yeah. There you go. Right. Exactly. You're pulling that, those rivers, that flow from Keter at the top of the Sephira into your divine self. And I think that where people get so confused is they see God as outside of them instead of allowing it, to live within them. And I think that where Protestants get confused is they think with that one little simple prayer, he's there all the time. You have to kind of think of it as it's energy. I look at it like this, and I could be wrong. I'm kind of almost like have a little bit of a science mind sometimes.
No,
but I think of it kind of like this water right here, right? And I sit here and I drink it, but it gets used up. My body uses that up. And then it takes whatever is no longer necessary, that's not good, and it depletes it out of my body. Well, I still need to drink that water every day because my body needs it. Well, we're kind of, here we go with the water thing again, and yeah, so it's like, so we need to be pulling that energy into us on a regular basis. And it does get diluted and it gets used and it gets, kind of like evaporates a little bit because we don't know how to hold it within us permanently. And I think that with some of the traditions like you belong to, and like some of the things that I belong to, those traditions teach us how to, learn how to hold it in us permanently. I mean, like our goal is ultimately to be like Christ, right?
That's what he would say.
Yeah, that's what he would say, right? Yeah, but, so I don't know. I mean, like, that's just my thoughts. But we're here to hear about yours. So what do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I mean, it's true. I think that's why things like Alcoholics Anonymous work, because they focus on God and they try to get people developing that internal locus of control. I used to work, I'm a therapist, so I've worked with people, occupational therapy for many years. And I worked with people with alcoholism at one point in my career. And there was this guy that I'll call Mick, who, it's not his real name. He told me that he had a long life of, using alcohol as his solution to all his problems. It really, and in the beginning, of course, it helped because it relaxes you and it makes you feel good, so you have some more and then some more. And he also had some past trauma that was driving him, that kept him in a sort of state of pain and difficulty in his mind. So in order to keep nullifying that, he kept drinking. So eventually he became alcoholic. And then when he started working on himself and through Alcoholics Anonymous, which I think is a great organization. It's one of the only things that's everywhere. People can go to meetings all the time. And anyway, so Mick started going to them. And the shift that happened was when he realized that it was his responsibility. It's down to him. It's not, he can't tell, because he'd spent his life projecting parent figures onto all kinds of people and blaming authority figures for his problems. And, but eventually once he realized, it's actually up to me. That was the shift he needed, and he stopped drinking, and he really lives a perfect life now. He has a really nice life. He's married, and he's doing really well. But it took him to sacrifice that, which is something else I want to come on to in a minute. His own ego, which was attached to external things as the solution, and he would got himself into all kinds of problems through that, fights and ended up in jail a few times and all that kind of stuff, simply because he was attached to the external. And people do that with Jesus. They project a father figure onto him in the wrong way. They see him as a parent that's going to punish them or a parent figure that's telling them, oh no, you shouldn't do that, which is not that was not his point. I mean, he was the biggest rebel going at the time. If you really read the history, he rebelled against the Romans and the kind of religious figures at the time who were controlling everybody, and said, no, that's not what it's about. You're going down the wrong track, guys. It's about you inside and your connection with God. And I think this now leads on to another really important point, which is, how do you get there?
Exactly.
And how do you get there is through sacrifice. And that's the symbol of Christ on the cross. It's a very deep symbol. It's not just, a man being crucified, and it's a gory image or a thing to worship. It's not just that. It's actually teaching us something just through that image. It's about, like, if you give up and sacrifice your need to make money or to, drink alcohol or whatever it is the thing that you feel really stuck with. At the point when you give that up and you realize everything's in you, then you're sacrificing that. It may be painful. I mean, Jesus on the cross was in pain, all the time during that experience, but that was the only way to free himself, because it is painful when you're attached to something. It's kind of like, that thing when you hold on to ice and your fingers get stuck on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't take them off. And if you do, you may feel pain as the outer layer of your skin comes off with it because the ice is so cold. Or with electricity, people hold on to electricity, they can't let go. It's that kind of, which is the devil card in the tarot, interestingly. You just can't let go of that feeling of attachment. And first of all, you have to get yourself into a mindset where you want to repent. You want to give up, because without that, you're not going to give up. So as John the Baptist said, repent for your sins, and then I will symbolically cleanse you through a water baptism, which is a powerful thing. I've been through one of those. It's incredible. And so he got people, but the point of it was to get people into the state of mind of, yes, actually, I could give this up. I want to stop this process and stop being in pain. It's the only way to do it. So, and then once they're in that mindset, then Jesus gives the teachings about how to do it, which is connecting with your divine, starting to allow that to govern your life rather than all these external things. But it is painful to give up the things you're used to for years, probably. I mean, all of us find that, right? If you had to, you're used to, let's say, usually a classic example is drugs or alcohol. If you're used to an addiction as a way of solving all your problems, and that works for you, it's really hard to stop it, right? And what do you replace it with? So Jesus was saying, well, if you're willing to stop, if you repent, and say, look, I have sinned. I want to stop. I want to be free of this. Then he says, come follow me. Give up all the things that you're attached to and follow me. Give up everything because you don't need it. And the material mind, the lower man says to us, well, yeah, I do need it. I'm like, how can I give this up? And then when you listen to your spiritual inner self saying, well, actually, you don't need it. Everything could change around you and you'd still be there.
Yeah. Well, who was it? Like Nicodemus at the very end, and he was like, he was standing on the corner, and he was so close, and he left them with a lot of money, and Jesus was like, you came so close, but he couldn't give up his life, right?
Yeah, it gets me every time. I always feel like emotional for Nicodemus. He just nearly got there. Yeah.
Yeah, I nearly got there. I think that's so symbolic, because I think you hit on some really important parts about sacrificing. You hit some areas like drugs or alcohol. There's so much more. It's like, can we sacrifice our need to judge others? Can we sacrifice our need to put our feelings before we put others? When somebody, when you get into a debate or an argument with somebody, what typically happens with most people is, this is how I feel, but this is how I feel, but this is how I feel, but this is how I feel.
Yeah.
You sacrifice your own feelings and just listen. Listen to what the other person is saying and maybe try to understand. And if you can just try to understand their viewpoint about where they're coming from and why, maybe there's some sort of compromise or a deeper understanding as to why that person is behaving or feeling or responding in a certain way. And I think that in most situations, if you do that, you can pretty much get along with almost anybody.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this part that you said about the whole sacrificing, because you can take that so many different levels. That whole symbology of him sacrificing his life for us, it's like, that's what we're supposed to do. It's when he says, follow me, he's saying, be like me. Well, he sacrificed his life. You don't have to sacrifice your life, but you can sacrifice something. Maybe you can sacrifice your judgmental attitude or your hate that you have for people or your pain, let it go. Do you need to carry with you this pain that you've had for years and years and years? Can you sacrifice that so that you can move forward?
Right. Exactly.
I love it. Yeah. I love what you said. That was so awesome. That was so powerful. It really meant a lot to me.
I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, I spent years meditating on this, so I guess I've got to that point where I've realized that. And how I think this was also Christ's point was, like when you're a parent and you have kids, they do everything you say and do, and they watch you, or not necessarily what you say, but they copy a lot of things from who they perceive as their role model in their life. And I think Christ did that. He was trying to show us much more than his words generally were stories and as ways to help people understand things. He never sort of said, oh, you should do this. There was never anything like that really in the Bible. not obviously anyway. And it's a bit like he probably understood people so well that he knew they would actually copy his actions more than actually listen to the words, or they would learn from the stories, and because humans do that naturally, don't we? We learn from other people's mistakes. We learn from hearing about how somebody did something, and we think, oh yeah, I could actually do that, or I might do it better and differently, or and then we go and do it, and we find that actually that worked. I think Jesus understood that really well, and that's why he was teaching in that manner. And also living a life of poverty and going on the cross and all of these things was to show people what the way is, not to tell them. It was, St. Francis has a great quote, because he was such a spiritual human being. I mean, regardless if you're Catholic or not, his teachings are unbelievable. And one of the things he said was, preach regularly, and if necessary, use words. Or something. So, and I really love that. And that's how I try and live my life, is to try and show, if possible, how to be kind, how to be, compassionate, how to understand people or make them feel that they can learn things in their life and achieve what they need to achieve, rather than patronizing them and telling them, oh no, you're a sinner and you should do this. That doesn't work. Who even listens to that? They might bottle it up and feel guilty and then go and drink lots of alcohol to cover up their pain, but they won't learn. Or they might.
You made a good point. Yeah, you made a really good point, because instead of saying, because you're doing this, this, and this, you're a horrible sinner, why not engage with that person and try to be compassionate about them and find out why they're doing this, and not go into it with judgment? You'd be a much better example and for other people if you set that path. And I can tell you personally, with my family, when I decided that I was literally going to walk the path and I was going to be this person, every single moment, every single breath that I took, I was going to exercise love and compassion. My mother and some of my other family members, there was always drama. There was always something going on in the family. Okay. My mom was always worried about something. And so there was a lot of negative energy. I started to notice that when I started taking this approach with love and kindness and compassion, and I didn't say your negativity is driving me crazy, I just sort of eased her in a different direction and said, I know that you're feeling bad, so let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something that makes you happy. And, just kind of moving her in a different direction. And over time, I noticed this woman started to become the most positive, loving person I've ever known. I mean, she's seriously angelic now. And
yeah.
It makes a difference. And I've noticed other people in my family starting to do the exact same thing. This kindness that they have internally is now being expressed. And it's because you walk in and you become the example, and other people follow through. And, Jesus said that you can tell the difference between a false prophet and a prophet by the fruits that they create.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a lot of people may think, oh, you read tarot and you channel and you do all this other stuff. As Michelle, I don't know about that, but I will say is that I know that I can tell by the fruits that come from my life and how I see people transform in front of me. I know that, it's that's kind of, I know that at least I'm on the right path, because if it wasn't, then I'd be questioning, am I? And I've questioned, I've literally sat down and prayed about it, it's am I in the wrong path? Is this the wrong way? Am I getting way off course? And I'll tell you something that actually happened to me that you'll probably find kind of cool. I got on this weird rabbit hole where I was wondering, why is God's name only mentioned a couple of times in the Bible?
Oh.
Yeah. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, or Yahweh, or however you want to say it, it's only mentioned a few times in the Bible. And so I was doing all this research on it, and I found a Jewish website, and the Jewish website said that the reason why they took it out of the Bible and replaced it with Lord, because the saying the actual name and vibrating it and saying it correctly, it actually can invoke the spirit. And they didn't want people walking around invoking God. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, heck, I'm invoking God. And so I literally sat down. This is before I joined the mystical order. I literally sat there and I went into meditation and I just sat there and chanted it. And at the time, I didn't know it was Yod Hey Vav Hey. I just said Yahweh, which, I think God understood that I was saying, Well,
and,
yeah.
Really say that.
Exactly. So I just sat there and chanted it nonstop for like hours.
Wow.
Yahweh, 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 over and over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, I started having an outer body experience. And I found myself running, and there was somebody behind me going, over here, over here. And he pushed me into this, what looked like a big warehouse. And then there was these 3 chairs. And he's like, go sit. And I sat down. And as soon as I sat down, there was a being on my right and a being on my left. And they both grabbed my hand. One grabbed my right, one grabbed my left. And suddenly I started feeling this vibration. Like I felt every emotion of every single person in the world at the same time. I felt every bit of love. I felt the trees, the animals, the wind, like everything. I felt like the all-inclusive consciousness of the earth. And it was like intense. And then all of a sudden this being comes down like he fell from the sky and came down, and he was like, and his voice was like thunder, right? Wow. And he's like, I am Yahweh, and it like vibrated. And I came out of the chair and I fell down on my knees, my feet on the ground, my head touching the ground, and I went, Father. And he said, I have nothing against you, child, nor your brothers. I was like, even now it like makes me emotional. About it because it was like, it was my connection to God that said, you're okay. You're not on the wrong track. And it's literally like I had my own personal experience with that. And for me, it's like, no matter what anybody says, it's like, you can sit here and tell me this, but I know for sure God said I'm cool. So,
well, there you go. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought I'd share that with you, but
that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really nice.
I think that, when we're talking about this kind of stuff, it's like, it's so emotional and it's so intense. And it's like, but I've spent years just like you, but not as many. I'm on spent 3 years with a Taoist monk. And then after that, I ended up joining this Western tradition. And I've spent 6 years so far working on elevating my consciousness through this, spiritual evolution and the ancient mysteries. I will say that every single time I go through another stage of this, it's like there's something that's like, I feel so good right now. I couldn't get any better. And then all of a sudden it's like poof, whoop, and it's like, wow, it's like, I feel so good. I couldn't get any better. I told my proctor this the other day. I was like, dang, I didn't even realize that you just keep on getting better, and he was like,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Well, anyway, this has been such an amazing conversation. I love it's my absolute favorite conversation. And
thank you. Me too.
It's so exciting. And it's so exciting to talk to somebody like you that has so much knowledge. And I'm really looking forward to doing more conversations with you on the Walk of Christ. Just continuing this as a series, where we're kind of going over different aspects of the life of Christ and the meaning of his message. And so I really want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to meeting with you next week and continuing this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's been I've really enjoyed that too. And
I have too. It's been amazing. All right, you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week.